Lexie Natasha tweeted and was just saying a bunch about pride and how proud she was of this team. Have you kind of had similar emotions the last couple days, and how do you balance that with it? Very painful.
No one in the WNBA and NBA expected it. A player who questioned every shot she hit and privately feared that today would be her release, barely managing to secure a spot on the squad throughout her first 2 seasons. Then almost instantly everything changed. In addition to going through the biggest transformation in women's basketball history, Lexie Hull became one of its most fascinating stories. And now, after living to the Caitlin Clark storm for years, she's finally spoken up about what it's been like. Not the polished media version, but the real one. She revealed something that nobody quite expected to hear before any of this made sense. You also need to understand where Lexie Hull was before Caitlin Clark came into Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Hull was chosen by the Indiana Fever as the 6th overall choice in the 2022 draft. On paper, it sounds like a dream. 6th place overall. Top 10 options. A Stanford alumna who had earned a national championship, 3 All-Pac-12 selections, and a class and Elite 90 honors for her outstanding athletic and academic performance in her last season. This was supposed to be the starting point. Rather, it turned into a slog that most outsiders never really observed because of the poor Fever during those early years. Not nearly as good. They had losing seasons and missed the playoffs entirely, making them one of the worst teams in the league. But Hull was forced to battle constantly to be on the squad, a situation that no young player wants to be in. Every single night was important. Each thing has an ill significance. She knew she was acting scared. Over her first 2 seasons, she averaged less than 5 points a game. In her second season, she played more than 20 minutes every night, yet she only managed 6 points. The numbers are correct. Something was holding her back. Hull would later determine exactly what that object was. Few athletes are ever willing to discuss those early years in public, but she did. Check out what she told Glamour magazine. There were moments when I felt that if I didn't shoot, I may be benched or cut. Someone with outstanding credentials, a Stanford graduate, and a top 10 draft selection are all laying awake, legitimately fearing that one missed shot may end their careers. That was the reality of being on a losing team with nothing to ease the pain. She said that those early years were really nerve-wracking. A losing culture, no playoffs, no margin for mistake. The stakes were too high to overcome. As a result, everything mattered. Moreover, that kind of pressure has an impact on more than just your shot. It gets into your head. It changes the way you move, think, and breathe on the court. But something happened that changed not only Lexie Hull's career, but also the franchise's whole trajectory, and even the American women's basketball landscape as a whole. It was stifling Hull, and the Fever was going undetected by everyone outside. The Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark as the 1st overall choice in the 2024 WNBA draft. In case you need a refresher, here's a quick summary of Caitlin Clark's character at the time. Regardless of gender, the most decorated scorer in NCAA basketball history. A player who single-handedly made Big Ten women's basketball a must-watch event, destroyed decades-old records, and transformed Iowa Hawkeyes games into sellouts and national televised events. The WNBA as a whole was about to see if the excitement around her, which had never been witnessed for a women's basketball player, was real. It was sincere. Her status as the league's most important player was cemented by her record-breaking fan involvement and productivity during her first campaign. Suddenly, the Indiana Fever became the most talked about, controversial, and highly regarded team in the WNBA. Everywhere they went, there were sold-out crowds, national broadcasts, and a media frenzy. Caitlin Clark was wearing the Indiana Fever shirt, and Lexie Hull saw it all. Nobody actually talks about how Caitlin Clark has affected her coworkers. There were other factors besides visibility. Larger crowds, sponsorship agreements, and the cameras that followed them weren't the only factors. The biggest difference, according to Lexie Hull, is what happens within the lines throughout a game. Something that is essentially invisible unless you know what you're looking for. Caitlin Clark has a different viewpoint on the floor than almost everyone who has ever played this game. She has a great vision for the court. Her depth is unique. Coaches are also motivated by the way she attracts defenders. open perimeter shooters with no obstacles in their path. For someone like Lexie Hull, who had tortured herself over every shot attempt for 2 years, it was nothing short of liberating. Hull's depiction of the transition takes on a new significance when you take into account what came before it. After Clark arrived, she said with confidence, "I know I'm going to get open shots, but I don't need to be worried about whether they go in or they don't because I put in the work to set myself up for this, and I'll live with the outcome." That's freedom. The numbers support the type of freedom that is only achievable when the pressure valve is finally opened. Hull had a 47% three-point shooting percentage in 2024. 1%. It was one of the league's most successful shooting performances that year and a career best. Those looks resulted with her three-point percentage dropping back to 36.7%, which was precisely where she had been in college before the Clark's passing. The numbers tell the narrative even more effectively than the words. But the court wasn't the only place where things changed. The story gets much more fascinating at this point. The reason for this is because the off-court relationship between Lexie Hull and Caitlin Clark caused controversy, garnered media attention, and became one of the most talked about topics in women's sports. When Clark was picked, many truly concerned how she would adjust to a locker room full of strangers. During her 4 years at Iowa, she had played with Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin, her childhood colleagues. When she arrived in Indiana, she was a new face of the brand in a room where everyone else had already established connections. The concern was real. Would she fit in well? Would her interest insult the present players? Or would they embrace her? And this is what really happened. Almost immediately, she and Lexie Hull fell in love. At the conclusion of that first season, they were hanging out off the court in Indianapolis. They were posting on TikTok together, try with various drinks, and laughing as if they had been friends for years. The WNBA traveled to Mexico during the Olympic break. There was no doubting the connection, and fans adored it. However, the dynamic had expanded to such a degree by 2025 that it had a whole new name. After Sophie Cunningham was moved to Indiana in the off-season before the 2025 season, what had been a duet became a trio. The three of them, Clark, Hull, and Cunningham, started calling themselves the Trace Latches, and their collaborative efforts resulted in some of the most well-liked and humorous material in the league. Hull and Cunningham were Clark's famous caddies at an LPGA Pro-Am tournament. On social media, they were always making fun of one another. Hull mocked Clark's lack of sun exposure when he posted photos from Fever Media Day on Instagram with the caption, "We are so back." Clark may also benefit from some sun exposure. Hull said to People magazine in one of the most funny comments of the offseason, "It was a type of teasing that only happens in friendships when both people are really comfortable with each other." It also gave the WNBA fan base a close-up look at the players' personalities, something they had never really experienced before. Hull said that Clark will be there at her wedding, which has been planned since Hull and former outfielder Will Matson of the Pittsburgh Pirates were engaged in April 2025. The two originally met at Stanford, where Matson was a star baseball player before being chosen in the 6th round of the 2019 MLB draft. After retiring from baseball due to a series of illnesses, he relocated to Indianapolis to be with Hull, which says a lot about the basis of her life. Hull chose to face the side of playing with Caitlin Clark in a manner that most people in her situation would have disregarded or avoided entirely, despite the fact that everything has been cordial and joyful. And it's the part of this story that deserves the most attention. One of the most turbulent seasons in the WNBA's history occurred in 2025. Hull described Clark's entrance as having a certain attitude, a seriousness, a concentration, and an edge that suggested she was ready to reign and had finished adjusting. Hull told reporters before the season that Clark was obviously different in his second year. Hull says there's a clear sense that she's here and ready to do business. And at first, that read seemed to be just right. Through the first 7 games of 2025, Hull was playing the finest basketball of her career, scoring over 10 points per game and leading the WNBA in three-point percentage at 55.6%. At last, the Fever seemed like a united team. Then the injuries started. Clark's quad issue caused him to miss many games. Then there was an issue with the groin. Another soft tissue problem followed. On July 15th, during a game against the Connecticut Sun, Clark sustained his 4th injury in a matter of months, which resulted in one of the most heartbreaking images of the season. Clark seemed to be holding back tears as she exited the floor, leaned her forehead on the basket structure, and sat on the bench with a towel over her face after giving it all and seeing everything come apart. And Lexie Hull was seated by her, just like a real friend does when words can't express how they feel. Hull later spoke openly about Clark's leadership role at the time. Why me? Questions. She was angry that her body would not comply, even though she was working harder than anybody else in the building. It was a difficult chapter. Even though Clark missed a significant amount of the season, the Fever still managed to win. They persisted all the way to the WNBA semifinals, when they upset the eventual champion Las Vegas Aces in a pivotal Game 5 that necessitated overtime before Indiana's eventual loss. The run was made possible in large part by Hull's two-way tenacity, which isn't visible in a box score. Taking charge, making plays that kept games close when the team needed them, and defending the other team's best perimeter scorer each and every night. She kept thinking about something that she finally decided the public needed to know about. Following the October 2025 Women of the Year article in a beauty magazine, Lexie Hull made the decision to stop being careful with her comments. She was one of 5 players featured in the magazine, along with Nelissa Collier-Jones and the Sabali sisters. This was an appropriate title for someone who had quietly become one of the most respected players in the league. But the sections of that interview that went popular online have nothing to do with her engagement, clothes, or basketball stats. Hull made it quite apparent that it concentrated on the drawbacks of competing with the most famous female athlete. Because of the media attention and the supporters who have supported us since Caitlin arrived, I believe there is some jealousy over the Fever. That would have been enough to make news on its own. Then, however, she went farther. She said that rather than speculation or outside rumors, the Fever has heard what other teams have to say. Hull claims to have heard teams and players in other locker rooms saying they can't allow the Fever to win. The target is genuine. Every team contributes extra drive when they play Indiana, and this is real. And ever since Clark's arrival, Hull has been in the center of it. What she decided to do with that is what makes her reaction to all of it so intriguing. She didn't voice any complaints. She didn't act like a victim. Leaning in, she did so. It's okay if something outside of our control gives you more desire to defeat us. Hull remarked, great if that's what it takes for you guys to come and put in extra effort. Everyone ought to believe that they are receiving the best from everyone else. We do, in my opinion, get everyone else's best. Being at the center of one of the most contentious situations in women's sports is handled in a remarkably calm manner. Yes, because Caitlin Clark attracts attention from sources other than fans, cameras, and sponsorship deals. It includes opponents who mark every Indiana matchup as a playoff game on the calendar. Referees under a microscope are included. Every action taken by a Fever player is scrutinized, recorded, debated, and weaponized by those who have never visited a professional basketball arena. And Lexie Hull has spent the last 2 years living in all of it. In a way that no outsider could, she has witnessed it firsthand. And she spoke her truth with a clarity that cuts through the clutter when she eventually made the decision to do so. When you view the entire trajectory of what Lexie Hull has gone through, there is something worth pausing on. Additionally, she entered the league as a gifted player on a bad team, enduring seasons in which every shot seemed to have life or death implications. Her self-assurance was broken. It was unclear what her role was. She had little influence over the franchise she had staked her career on, and it was in freefall. Then everything changed when the most disruptive force in women's basketball history appeared. The fans, the culture, the direction of the team, and even Hull's self-perception as a player. And rather than getting engulfed by it all or fading into the background, she emerged as a key character in the WNBA's most captivating tale. Lexie Hull has become someone she was never throughout those difficult early years thanks to the friendship, the social media moments, the in-court cooperation, the poignant sideline scenes, and the candid glamour interview, a household name. She was dangerous because of her ability to shoot 3 points. She was crucial because of her defense. However, those who follow this league closely found her genuinely interesting because of her desire to be honest about what it meant to be in Caitlin Clark's world. What will happen next is the question that currently looms over everything. For the first time in her career, Hull started the offseason as a restricted free agent, which alters the equation in ways that even she said she couldn't entirely anticipate. In Indianapolis, she has established a life. To be near her, her fiancé moved. She has expressed her love for the fans, the series, and Indiana as a whole. However, sentiment is not always important in the commercial world of professional sports. And the WNBA's collective bargaining position has created additional layers of uncertainty that no one in the league can currently properly traverse. The Fever has the power to match any offer that comes her way. Additionally, it is anticipated that Indiana will go to whatever lengths to retain her, considering everything she contributed in 2025. On Instagram, Caitlin Clark shared a picture of the two of them with just 3 letters as, "Please share your thoughts in the comment section, subscribe, and enable all notifications so you don't miss anything. We'll see you in the next one after you click the video on the screen." I know